Hannah or Marilka, we're ready to start anytime you tell us.
Yeah, it's Alexandra on Mr. L'Orange account who gonna stream it on YouTube. So she should let us know when to start, I think.
Yeah, she's starting it now.
Oh, perfect.
So, are we ready?
Yeah, we're on the YouTube live now, so we can start.
Thank you. All right. So welcome all. It is my great pleasure to moderate this panel today with Dr. Malliaropoulou, who is a lecturer and researcher at the TUAS in the field of ADR, and also together with Hanna Falkiewicz and Marilka Wendy, who are our two students from International and European Law program, helping out with this event and many other events. Thank you so much for doing so. My name is Warwas. I am a professor in multi-level regulation and the director of the Center of Expertise Global Governance at TUAS. And I think we can start with the introduction of our fantastic speakers today, and then I will say a few words on the format of the event. So I will start with Amanda Lee, who is a consultant at Seymour's, a dispute resolution boutique in London, where she acts as arbitrator and counsel in domestic and international dispute resolution proceedings, with particular focus on the automotive, construction, finance, and waste management sectors. Amanda is admitted to practice in England and Wales and to the New York Bar. Amanda is also a fellow at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, a member of the board of Arbitral Women, a very important function and also very relevant for us today for the discussions on diversity, and the Global Advisory Board of ICDR Y&A, which is Young and International. She founded also Careers in Arbitration, and this is to support those seeking to develop a career in the field of arbitration. In addition to all these, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Amanda is also hosting or co-hosting Delos TAC Time webinar series. So welcome, Amanda. It's a real pleasure to meet you and to have you here in our panel. And I'm really looking forward to our discussions.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. We also have Chris Campbell, who is currently a senior litigation counsel at Baker & Hughes with a focus on international arbitration. Chris has a truly international career. Prior to working with Baker & Hughes, Chris worked in South Carolina, where he litigated a number of eminent domain disputes and advised the Charleston Port Authority on matters related to trade law and international commercial arbitration. Chris also served as the inaugural law clerk to the Honorable Joycelyn Newman of the 5th Judicial Circuit of South Carolina, and Chris also worked for a Beijing law firm in the field of corporate law. Chris also served and still serves on a number of committees, including as a vice chair for the IBA, International Arbitration Committee. And last but not least, and that's a very interesting initiative, Chris is the host and curator of the podcast Tales of the Tribunal, which covers dynamic and intriguing personalities in international dispute resolution. So not only Chris is one of them, but he also talks on a regular basis to many interesting figures. So welcome, Chris. A real pleasure to have you. And again, thank you for devoting some time on Thanksgiving, and happy Thanksgiving to you. We also have Amanda Kemshaw, who is a lecturer in skills and private law at TUAS. Amanda joined the program in September, if I'm correct, this academic year. And I think it was quite some career change for Amanda. Before joining TUAS, Amanda has been for over 20 years a dancer, a police crime analyst, and an international lawyer and advisor. Amanda spent 16 years in private practice. This involved also 7 years as International Arbitration Counsel at De Brouw here in Amsterdam. And here she is with us. Welcome, Amanda. Very nice to meet you again. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you today with our students.
Very happy to be here. Thanks, Barbara.
And we also have Susanna Cieplinska, who is our law program alumna. Susanna is currently undertaking LLM in international arbitration at Stockholm University. Susanna is also former intern at Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration and Australian Disputes Centre, and a former trainee at the Embassy of the Republic of Poland. Susanna spent a year in Beijing, which probably connects her with Chris, where she successfully finished master courses at Beijing Foreign Studies University in Chinese law. And Susanna is a laureate of a number of international competitions and moot courts. Thank you very much, Susanna, for being here with us today. It's a great pleasure to see you again. And we're looking forward to you sharing your experiences as law alumna with our students.
Thank you so much for invitation. I'm really glad to be here today and tell the students about my experiences. Thank you.
Fantastic. So before I move to the format of the event, I thought that it would also make sense if I tell you, our distinguished speakers, a little bit about our students and what is happening in the field of ADR here at TUAS. So let me just start very briefly by mentioning that our research group on multi-level regulation and the Center of Expertise is having a number of research projects through which we want to increase inclusiveness of contemporary regulation through ADR. So that's a very broad approach, but we really see ADR, especially negotiation, mediation, and also to some extent arbitration, as great tools through which we can actually increase diversity and social inclusion in contemporary regulatory work. On top of that, we have a great pool of researcher students who do a lot of projects on ADR. And Hannah, you see her on the screen. She's among them. So our students are really active in the field of ADR. They developed their own website. They developed their own podcast series where they actually also talk with practitioners in ADR. They also collect information on careers and internships in the field of arbitration or ADR, and they do many other things such as blog posts, for example. So we just started 1.5 years ago with these student-driven projects, and we're growing very fast. And I hope that students will be also able to tell you a little bit more about this. And last but not least, today we have a number of students joining us for this panel. So we have year 1 and year 2 students, those who only joined the law program, but also those more advanced. So we have a very diverse group, those who already know quite a bit of ADR, those who are undertaking a minor in ADR now, where we are teaching with Artemis right now, and those who do not know much about this field. So they are here to learn from you, and I hope that we can inspire many young individuals today to take their career path in ADR field. So I really am looking forward to giving the floor to you. So I will just kick off with my first question. So also to let you know about the format, we plan to spend the first hour on questions from myself and Artemis, and then the second hour will be devoted solely for the Q&A session, where students will be invited to ask you questions through live chat or directly. So feel free to do this, dear students. We are here for you today, and we really would like to answer as many questions as you may have. All right. So to the business. Question 1. I would like to kick off this discussion with a very general question. Why arbitration? What was so interesting for you in the arbitration field when you started your career, or what inspired you to pursue a career in arbitration? Perhaps it was an informed decision, but perhaps it was also a coincidence. So we would really like to hear a little bit what triggered you to start working in the arbitration field, and what exactly now you think of this choice. Is it were your expectations met with what you're doing at the moment? Are you satisfied, or do you think that field is missing something with the view on your original expectations when you were starting? So I will maybe start with Amanda, and then I will go to Chris, Amanda, and Susanna. So Amanda Lee, excuse me, I didn't specify which Amanda I'm talking to. If we can start with you, Amanda Lee, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much, Barbara. That's a really great question. There's so much to unpack in it, and I shall try not to spend too much time talking so that everybody else can share their stories as well. I sometimes wonder how I ended up in my current position myself, to be honest. I'm basically the living embodiment of the idea that you may not end up where you expected, but you'll end up where you're supposed to be. So at university, for example, when I was in the position that some of your students are in, I was planning to be an IP lawyer, and I was going to be the best darn IP lawyer that I could be. And then by the time I got to law school, it was going to be banking. I was really interested in banking law. I was a really boring person, as you can imagine. Banking law was really, really, really sexy to me. And then I moved to London in order to actually become a lawyer, because there wasn't that much litigation or high net worth work in my hometown, which is a little county town. And I ended up joining a disputes boutique, and I became a litigator as a result. And as a litigator, I ended up having the opportunity to advise in respect of a lot of different methods of ADR. To those who don't know very much about ADR, ADR is obviously alternative dispute resolution, so any form of dispute resolution other than seeking recourse to the courts. Mediation, for example, is strongly encouraged in England and Wales, where I first qualified. So I've been involved in quite a few of those in my time. Mediations that have been done in half a day, mediations that have taken 3 days, mediations that have reconvened several weeks later. There's a whole range of different ways to get involved in mediation. I've worked on expert determination matters, construction adjudication cases, cases involving ombudsmen, negotiations, that's part and parcel of being a litigator, of course, and I've done some non-contentious negotiation as well. And of course, I found myself now with a sort of primary focus on international and domestic arbitration. A few years ago, I started sitting as an arbitrator, and I began lecturing at the University of Law, where I now teach mediation and ADR, which includes a unit of arbitration as well. And so by this rather sort of practical route, I found myself working in this field. And nowadays I split my time between counsel work, sitting, teaching, and consultancy work, which includes, for example, working with innovative companies such as an organization called Arbitrator Intelligence that's working to make arbitration more accountable, diverse, and transparent. There is no typical week for me. Last week, for example, I had a two-day Privy Council appeal. I participated in 4 webinars, which may give the impression that all I do is participate in webinars, but it's still fun, even after the whole of lockdown. Chris has participated in a few with me, so he will recall the early days of our Careers in Arbitration Tales of the Tribunal webinar collaboration. I teach on a regular basis as well and write articles. I try and help the next generation of practitioners to find roles through my platform Careers in Arbitration, which no doubt I'll talk a little bit about in due course. And hey, for your students who are trying to pull together details of internships, get in touch with me, hit me up. I know quite a lot about internships, I can assure you, having developed very long lists for Careers in Arbitration. So that's a little bit about me, how I ended up in this field. It changes all the time. It never stops evolving. Disputes change all the time, and we have to keep coming up with new and innovative solutions. So with that quite long introduction, I will leave it there and turn the floor back over to Barbara.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So just a follow-up question about expectations that you could have had or maybe had regarding the field. You of course mentioned that this is a very quickly developing field, and we have also new mechanisms. So from arbitration, we start using more mediation in combination with arbitration, and so on and so forth. So regarding your expectations, are you do you regret your choices, or are you happy to be in the field still?
I think I'm still happy to be here. I'm really interested to see where I'm going to end up in the next 10 years. It really is a fascinating field to be in. The benefits, of course, of going into a field such as arbitration are that you're never going to get bored, because ultimately a lot of arbitration counsel end up sitting, they end up teaching, they end up becoming academics. So there's always something new to work on. And all of your related disciplines make you a better arbitrator, a better academic, a better counsel. So it's a sort of a field that keeps on giving. And it's also a wonderful community. The international arbitration community is a very supportive community. We tend to know each other quite well. There's a lot of players on the scene. You get to know people, you build professional relationships that last a lifetime. So it is definitely a career that requires an investment of time, it requires an investment of energy, requires an investment of enthusiasm and dedication. But I'm happy to be where I am now, and I'm intrigued to see where the next chapter will take me.
We're also happy that you are there in the field, and you are also a great example of how to take things in your own hands. If something doesn't exist and if you want to change the field, you are there to do this on your own. So thank you very much for those initiatives that we will also touch upon later on. And now I am moving to Chris, and I also am very curious to know, Chris, how was it with you? How did you get inspired by arbitration? And why?
Well, thank you for that. And, I find myself with now the arduous task of trying to follow that great introduction from Mandy. So, forgive me for if I'm not able to reach that standard. To begin answering your question, Barbara, we actually have to take time travel a bit to Irmo, South Carolina, where I am from, just outside of Columbia, where the University of South Carolina is held. That's where I did my first degree, which was actually in business. I knew a couple of things when I left Irmo, which is a one railroad town. If you go there, there's quite literally a railroad through the middle, and that is all that you will see, that and a lake. But I knew that I wanted to study business, and I, from high school, knew that I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to marry those two things together. So I go to business school, learn all these, things about reading charts and doing case studies and all of those types of things, and decided that's what sparked my interest in China. So, at this point, I finished college and know that I want to do something that's international, whatever that means, that I want to do something that's related to business and something that has a legal element to it. And I applied to law school, get in, survived the first year. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the American legal law school education system, there is not a terrible amount of education on dispute resolution outside of traditional courtroom litigation. People see Law and Order or Suits and they're like, hey, that's it, I want to be Harvey Specter. Okay. And that's kind of the impression that a lot of law students will have. Well, as we all know, there's a whole universe, a whole lexicon of ways in which dispute resolution works outside of, domestic courtrooms. And so I went and did a Maymester at the end of my first year that ended up at the Gray's Inn of Court in London, where we studied there for about 2 months. And we had, English and American comparative law, but then also a little course called International Commercial Dispute Resolution. And this was the first time I really got the notion that there was this ability for organizations and companies and the like to have a sort of predictable means of resolving disputes across borders, aside from just saying, all right, we're going to sue them in their local court, or we're going to try and drag them into U.S. federal court. And so that really started getting the wheels turning, and that culminated, and similar to Susanna's experience, that's what gave me the inspiration to go study my 3L year in Beijing. Got a master's in Chinese law from Tsinghua University. with in Chinese law and international dispute resolution, and it's kind of been off to the races since then. Competed in the Beast Moot during that time, and it kind of just continued to build on itself. And there was this sort of guiding North Star of, okay, at the core of every mediation and arbitration in the commercial sense, we're talking about a business dispute of some kind. That's something that makes sense to me from my first degree and my interest, starting in business and solving a business issue. And we're going to take a legal mechanism of some kind and use that as our tool, as our procedure, as our method of resolving the business dispute. And oftentimes, if you can resolve this thing first, you can often obfuscate or go around the legal procedure itself. So that's where it all started. I had the privilege of studying with some great professors at Tsinghua and having some great mentors throughout this process. Started writing in the field, and it's kind of just taken off from there. And I think, sort of echoing some of the things that Mandy talked about is, as I started to make my own path in international dispute resolution, I kind of felt this sort of not even tension, but just sort of the frustration in that, I felt like I was facing headwinds, so to speak, and trying to find exactly where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. I realized law firm work wasn't quite it, and I didn't necessarily want to open up my own shingle, have to open up my own shop. So I found myself working in-house for Baker Hughes. And that sort of headwind that I felt, I didn't want anyone else to sort of have to deal with that. And so I'm constantly, in a lot of things that I do, both with Tales of the Tribunal, from Arbitration Idle, and some of the other events that we do, try to find ways to make international dispute resolution more and more accessible. In the way that Mandy talks about, really from the career standpoint, I understand in a very tangible way, because I was once a broke college student in China. I wanted to go to all these conferences, but conferences cost money and they're expensive. And, it's, you may not say, hey, you can't come to this conference, but if you say to students, hey, yeah, you can come, but you got to pay us $1,000 or $400, that's effectively the same thing. So, that is sort of a nutshell of, how I kind of discovered my interest in international dispute resolution, and sort of how I've sort of decided to build my brand and my reputation in the field. And now, folks may not, know exactly what we do at Baker Hughes and what we do in that capacity, but at least they probably heard a commercial or a snippet of my podcast. And I hope that will continue to make international dispute resolution more accessible to anyone that wants to find a space here.
Sounds fantastic, really. ADR for the 99%, that's our motto. We really want this to be more accessible for students. Unfortunately, I believe it's still a little bit within the periphery of curricula too. And if it is within curricula, it's mostly within law curricula, whereas we can really take and learn a lot from mediation and negotiation also in other areas and fields of studies. But that's great to know. And Chris, very briefly, also would like to follow up. Do you think that now, due to the pandemic and all the where we can all participate in so many different conferences, and students also have many opportunities to follow online events, do you think that this horrible thing that we are experiencing now can actually have some positive impact on the field when it comes to accessibility?
Yes.
I agree. That's a very big question, of course, but yeah.
Yes, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, even though in these unfortunate times that we find ourselves in. I think there are two things that go with that. And briefly stated, it's a unique opportunity to really sort of create your own brand and create your own value here in this case where we can't be in the same room. Whether it's, starting a webinar series, a podcast, you don't have to even do something as ambitious as that. You can just start writing little insights or little small articles on your LinkedIn. There are tons of organizations across the globe that would love for people to submit things to them. There are all sorts of ways that you can get involved. But the second part of that, and what I want everyone to take away from this, is that you also have to be careful to not overcommit, to not overextend. Because we're in a situation where there is literally an event at almost every hour of the day, and there are tons of projects that you can be involved in, it's very easy to sort of commit to everything, and then you realize you've got a ton of deadlines plus whatever it is you're responsible for your day job or for classes, and you don't want to burn yourself out. So yes, there's a ton of opportunity, and you should absolutely go for it, look for what's missing in the field and create it. And two, be careful and don't do too much.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Now I'm moving to Amanda Kemshaw. Maybe you could tell us now how you ended up in international arbitration or international dispute resolution field.
Absolutely, thank you. And being third, very tough acts to follow, Chris and Amanda, but I will do my best. In terms of my background, similar to Chris, you have to sort of step back in time. 20 years ago, it seems like a very long time ago, but when I graduated from my undergraduate degree, which was in criminology and contemporary dance. And I wanted to be a dancer, a dancing lawyer, as it turns out. And I danced professionally after I graduated from university. And then I ended up going and working at the Calgary Police Service in Canada as a tactical crime analyst. And while I was doing my CSI stuff at the police department, I worked on a first-degree murder trial and worked with the Crown prosecutor and really got into sort of the legal elements and thought, I can do this job. I should go to law school so I can do this. And so I applied to law school, ended up getting in. And when I went to law school, I was going to be a prosecutor, criminal law all the way, rah, criminal law. And I got into law school and I took everything. I wanted to learn everything. So I took tax law, business law, criminal law. And I ended up getting wooed by one of the largest law firms in Canada, which is a commercial litigation practice. And they convinced me by saying, oh, come for the summer as an intern and try it out. I know you want to do criminal law, but, just come. And to sweeten the deal, you can do an internship somewhere else as well, and we'll pay you as if you were working for us. And I ended up going to Australia and working at a legal aid clinic for underprivileged youth for half my summer. And the other part of the summer, I was in Toronto working for Tories, which ended up being the law firm that I worked at. So I ended up going away from criminal law into the commercial litigation field. And ADR, we were very lucky in my law school. We had a mediation course that you could take as an elective, which I took. We had restorative justice classes and also trial practice classes. So I sort of was getting into it right from the very start in law school. And when I got into practice, I ended up working on two very large cases, one for 3 years and one for 5. The first one was traveling all across Canada, negotiating with a team of lawyers for one of the largest cases in Canadian history, which was the Indian residential schools class action. And I was a second-year associate, and I was literally in every province of Canada with a team of lawyers, and I was one of the lead negotiators. So trial by fire, learning on the job, really getting into the negotiation tactics and working on a settlement of that very huge case. And the other one that I did for 5 years was a case that went to negotiation, mediation, arbitration process, where the mediator was also going to be the arbitrator, so a med-arb process. And I did, I think, over 50 mediations. So really got my feet wet in the ADR field in the first 5 years, so 6 years of practice. And then also did a number of NAFTA arbitrations and that type of a thing, cross-border work between Canada and the US. And then things went sideways because I fell in love with a Dutchman and flew over to Europe. And really, the international arbitration element fell in my lap. I got over here. I took a sort of a sabbatical from my law firm in Canada, and just to try it out, and started looking around, and I heard about this law firm DeBrow, and ended up phoning the head of the arbitration practice there and said, maybe we can have a chat. And ended up chatting with about six or seven of the partners there, and saying, you need me with my trial expertise, oral advocacy, all the years of experience. in that field, and they agreed with me and hired me, and so I worked there for 7 years, and that it was really sort of more luck than anything else. I think the right timing, but also for me as a trial lawyer coming from Canada, I actually didn't think that I would be able to practice in the Netherlands, continuing to do that type of work. Except in the arbitration field, because of the fact that it's very similar in terms of the structure, doing examinations, cross-examinations, that kind of a thing. And it was really wonderful that De Brouw opened their arms to me, and I spent a great 7 years doing that. And then I decided I wanted to try something different, and now I'm with you and the rest of the students at TUS, and I'm currently teaching legal skills classes, and private law classes, which I'm really enjoying.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It really sounds fascinating. You are very modest also in your bio, and you have done so many great things, and we're very happy to learn about this. I would like to push you a little bit harder on this move into from private practice into the academy part. So could you maybe tell us why you decided for such a move, and was it why?
Sure, very good question. I get that a lot. First from my partners at the law firm saying, what the heck is happening? But one of the things that really drove me after a number of years in practice was working with the junior associates. So I was a senior mentor, I was a development manager in the arbitration practice, and I really wanted to work with the students and the junior lawyers on their skills, on their development. It was really important to me, and it became more of a priority and something that I got a lot more energy and joy from than the actual cases in the last couple of years of my practice. And it was something that was always a secondary priority at the law firm. First and foremost, clients. And for me, I was just really interested in development. So I actually, after I left the firm, I took some time off and I went and worked with a coach because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And she kept saying to me, teaching. And I was, no, I don't think so. And then, a light bulb moment, I thought, you know what, this is really, what I like to do. And my parents are teachers, so I think I come to it honestly. And I was attracted to TUS because of the fact that it's an applied program, because of the offer of the skills classes, and really to be able to give that practical experience, which I hope I'm imparting to the students. I'm really enjoying it. It's, obviously a steep learning curve for me coming into a university environment from 17 years in private practice. I think I'm learning as much from the students as they're learning from me. So it's great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're very happy to have you at TUS, and I will already be following up with you on some projects. But that's after our call. So now I would like to move to Susanna. Susanna, can you tell us a little bit more what inspired you to further study arbitration?
Yes, so unlike Chris and Amanda Lee and Samantha Kemschel, I am still a freshman in the field of ADR. My adventure with ADR and in particular arbitration started when I was a student at the Hague University, and I actually remember your book launch, Dr. Warwas, on your book, and it was really inspiring. In my second year, I got into the Wismut team. I represented the Hague University in the competition in Vienna together with my colleagues from a year above. I remember I was actually the only second-year student on a team. I would say that Wismut was my first step into this international commercial arbitration world. And for those who don't know, Wismut is an international moot court competition specifically focused on international commercial arbitration. I believe it is one of the most prestigious competitions in the field of international commercial arbitration. I still remember my long hours in the library with Unicitral, Model Law, and CISG. This is how it all started. The competition in Vienna was for sure a great learning and networking experience. I got to know some very respected and experienced people in the field during my time in Vienna, whom I actually crossed paths later on as well too. For example, while interning at the Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration, and also while pursuing my master's in arbitration in Stockholm. After all, I think I already noticed that it is quite a small world in the field of arbitration. So after my experience with this, I knew that I want to pursue my career in this field. And as already mentioned, in my third year of studies, I left for a year to do my exchange in Beijing, in China. There I also had a chance to network, to see how arbitration works over there, and meet some lawyers who specialize in arbitration and in that region, not only commercial but also investment arbitration. In the region, and from Beijing I flew to Australia for my internship at the Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration and also Australian Dispute Centre, where I spent 3 months, and I'm currently a master's student at Stockholm University. So this is my story. This is how it all started.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Quite a path already. Congratulations, and it's really remarkable. Maybe you could, as a follow-up question, tell our students how hard or easy it was to get into Stockholm University, and how did you find this process?
So I remember that I already had to apply around January. The application process is quite fast there in comparison to some other universities. But from what I remember, I had to write a cover letter. I had to write cover letter. I also need some references, academic references, to support my cover letter, and my grades transcript. I remember that I worked really hard for these grades in this last year throughout the whole program, of course. But the last year is also a chance to push it a little farther with the scores. So definitely study hard. And in general, I believe that the application process was quite smooth. So everything was quite nicely explained on the website of Stockholm University. I did not have any problems with any technical issues, and also the university itself is also very helpful throughout the whole process. So very informative and helpful for sure.
Fantastic, Susanna, and we will learn more about your experience, I hope, later on. Just to mention to our students that Stockholm University provides one of the most prestigious masters in international arbitration in Europe. So if you are interested also in career in international arbitration, that's the master that you should have on your radar. All right, thank you very much all for these great presentations, and now I'll give the floor to Artemis, who will ask you more intriguing questions. Artemis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you very much everyone for sharing your inspiring stories. I mean, listening to you, I said, okay, even if I had no clue about international arbitration, I would like to give it a try. Thank you so much for that. I think I will continue with a more specific question about international arbitration. So if you had a magic wand and could improve one thing in international arbitration, I mean, what it would be? Based on your practice and your research on this field, what is currently the most the most important, the most topical puzzle issue that you identify, and how would you respond to it? And I think I will start with Mandy. Mandy, how would you use your magic wand?
If you want to have a magic wand, I hope the magic wand is going to reach me very soon, because there are definitely things that I like to use it to try and improve within the field. The example I'm going to give is an aspect of our practice that I've spoken about a little bit before during lockdown, and it's one of the biggest challenges that our field presently faces. And Chris has touched on it a little bit by explaining that it's really expensive to attend conferences in the field. So as a profession, as a field, we need to do more to address socioeconomic barriers to those talented individuals across the globe who want to enter our field. Today's students are tomorrow's counsel and arbitrators, and the challenges that go back to the beginning of our legal careers have a significant impact on who we're appearing for and who we're going to be appearing with in the future. So if I had a magic wand, then I would use it to encourage law firms, institutions, and others who employ those seeking to enter the field to think a little bit more carefully about what they're offering. We place a very heavy premium as a profession on things like unpaid internships or poorly paid internships, and that's a big barrier to entry for a number of candidates. We also place a premium on LLMs. So I would use my magic wand to try and make it easier for people who may not have socioeconomic advantages to enter the field. I'm conscious I may have been having some slight connection problems, so I'm not sure how much of that you heard.
I heard you very well. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives and for highlighting such an important issue. Amanda, would you like to share your views and tell us what would you do with this superpower if you had? What would you like to change in the international arbitration field?
Well, I think what I would like to touch on, I think, is a little bit about diversity, and it's something that at least in my practice, what I pushed a lot for in terms of as a practitioner and appointments of arbitrators is pushing for more women arbitrators, equal representation, which is obviously a movement that has been going on for a number of years, but something that was still, at least in my practice, very slow to catch on. In terms of, and not only obviously male-female diversity, but different cultures, nationalities, in terms of arbitral panels, more representative of the world. I mean, if I had that magic wand and I could wave it, that's definitely an area that I would tackle, which I think is so necessary in an international environment, that it's reflective, that arbitral panels and bodies are representative of the world in general. So that's what I would do.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Chris, would you like to share with us your views about the main issue that you identify that it's a real problem in international arbitration, and what do you think we can all do to deal with it?
Sure. Well, the two Amandas have spoken on the things that probably take up a large amount of real estate in my mind, so I won't mention those again beyond to just say I echo those sentiments exactly, especially as it goes to ethnic and cultural diversity. And, you know, we consider how diverse and how vast the world is, and how many different regions there are, and how many different client needs there are, and we don't need to have, you know, and I say this as an American, you know, we don't need to have the same American firms over and over again. We don't need to have the same European firms in areas where local counsel might even be better served serving the client. So I would say that is at the outset. I think the two other things that I would mention are, first, a little bit more, I don't know, ambition or willingness to be a bit more progressive in an already really conservative field that is law, and then especially international arbitration. There are many tactics as it goes to business development, imparting information, just organizing information that are commonplace in a lot of different fields that we just don't see in law because it's too edgy and it's too dangerous. But even things like, explaining how international commercial arbitration works. I mean, if you Google that, you might see, a couple of articles from a law firm, and they might have an infographic, and that might be it. But, if you wanted to do that same sort of idea with understanding, let's say, finance or something like that, there's probably some sleek videos that are put together, or there are people that really explain it, put it on a very basic level for you. And I think if we think about the broader issue of making it so that students and new entrants into the field can understand what the heck international commercial arbitration is and what does international dispute resolution mean, I think the first step is really organizing that information well. So a lot of the things that I advocate for and that I suggest and encourage people to create are those types of things that just say, okay, what is one really narrow thing of international arbitration, and how can you make that more plain and more clear, less opaque? Number one. Number two is kind of an offshoot of I think what all of us have been talking today, and that is sort of investing in those coming behind us. I think one of the things that it takes to make a name for yourself in international arbitration, to be where you want to be, is having that helping hand up. And I think most of us at some point have had someone like that. I know I certainly have. And if you don't have that, it's almost virtually impossible to do. And I think that we as people in the field have to continue to own that and to encourage our peers to be involved in that process too, because there's tons of folks that want to be involved, and it's not like there's a shortage of things to do in the field. So let's bridge that gap and help folks get to be involved if they want to be.
Thank you very much for your inspiring observations. Thank you so much for that. Now I would like to turn to Susanna. Susanna, you decided at a very early stage to specialize in international arbitration. So during your studies and your research in this field, what is the main thing that you would like to improve in international arbitration?
Well, I think that I will refer to actually the current problem with the pandemic. I'm studying at the moment remotely and participating in all my seminars and other activities online. And I actually have just finished the mock arbitration. It was a really amazing experience, even though it did not look like it always does. It still was a great success. And actually, mock arbitration is one of the most exciting parts of the program, I would say. Students are supervised by three big law firms. I was actually under the supervision of Baker McKenzie lawyers. I was representing claimants in the proceedings. So we were representing a Swedish company against a Russian oil company, and the arbitration was conducted in accordance with the SEC rules. So these were actually really intense 3 weeks for me, weeks of drafting submissions, briefs, preparing for oral hearings, for cross-examinations. At the end, I must say that even though the experience would probably be very different if it could take place there in Stockholm in the law firm, but I think that the way things are organized in the online setting, it's working really, really well, and I cannot complain. This virtual reality also gave us many opportunities to meet a lot of professionals in the field, and we have a lot of guest lectures organized. For example, I had a chance to meet Alexander Fesas, Secretary General of the ICC International Court of Arbitration, or Sarah Grimmer, Secretary General of Hong Kong International Arbitration Center. So for sure, we also can benefit from this situation, and I believe that in general, that both in academic as well as specifically in arbitration world, it had to adjust to this new reality. Virtual hearings, all of the internal arrangements of the arbitral institutions, and this is something that was just that just forced everyone to change the way of doing certain things. And also, as we meet with the lawyers who represent clients in arbitration in this virtual setting, or as I mentioned, the secretaries of arbitral institutions or legal councils, this is always something that they reflect on, how the process of this adjustment looked like, what were the problems incurred. And I remember also one discussion on the confidentiality of the proceedings in the and the challenges faced in virtual hearing setting, for example. So I think this is a very current issue, but also I think this sort of motivates us in terms of introducing the use of new technologies into academia and arbitration. So thank you.
Thank you very much for focusing on the bright side and for trying to persuade us that we can turn the crisis into an opportunity. So thank you very much. Cautious of time, I would like to touch upon something that Chris mentioned about the importance of mentorship. And also, I would like to continue with a number of projects that you have initiated. And personally, I have been greatly benefited from. I mean, the careers in arbitration, the tales of the tribunal, and the arbitration idols, which was fundraising for UNICEF, which was an exciting project. Mandy promised us that, like James Bond, arbitration idols will return. So Mandy and Chris, could you please tell us how they all started? What was the trigger of your work that promotes community spirit in times of crisis and beyond? If I may use the Clue Arbitration blog's excellent title for your work, and of your cooperation and how you organize these projects that really spread knowledge to ADR practitioners across the globe, with a special focus on the younger generation. And Amanda, you also mentioned about mentoring in the context of a law firm. So I would like you to elaborate more on that. I would like to start with Chris. Chris, the floor is yours.
So actually, I think the person that was sort of the brainchild of, or the inspiration for Arbitration Idol may not be on the call. And it was actually a colleague of Mandy and I's, Svenja Wachel, who is a German practitioner, and she's over digital coffee breaks in arbitration. That's her initiative. They share a lot of great information on LinkedIn. And so we had collaborated on another event earlier in the year. And we had a WhatsApp, and we're like, okay, well, this first event is done. You know, what else could we do? I mean, you know, this is in the throes of the pandemic. Clearly, the cases are spiking all over the world, and being aware of the conversations that we'd all been having kind of internally about how this is just devastating for people that had, you know, they were supposed to be starting an internship, supposed to be starting a new opportunity, that look forward to networking at these types of things, and that a lot of that would just be washed away. And so Svenja actually, you know, had said, what if we did some sort of fundraiser, you know, and it started as a raffle, and then we started researching how to do an international raffle, and that was really hard. So so instead, what we did was we came up with the idea of Arbitration Idol. And for those of you that don't know, Arbitration Idol was more or less an opportunity for us to fundraise for UNICEF, and at the same time, I guess it was maybe a drawing instead of a raffle, and I don't know the legal ramifications therefrom, but we matched folks up with some folks that are well known and pretty dynamic forces in international arbitration. And when we reached out to them, you'll be surprised perhaps to even hear what some of their thoughts were. First, they were all immediately ready to jump in and help. You know, folks like my boss Mike McElrath, Funke Adekoya, you know, and a number of other. You know, I don't want to go through the whole list. But the second thought, and you know, this came from multiple of the idols, was that you know, and I think she wouldn't mind me saying it because she's spoken on it. But Lucy Reed shared that you know, we don't want to be held up as idols. You know, that's not how we want to be perceived, and that was well heard. You know, really the only reason we even called it Arbitration Idol is because at least me, I'm old, and I remember American Idol, the popular American singing show, and it was kind of sort of a punny sort of name. So that's how we arrived at that, and it was kind of an easy branding thing. But now that that's done, and now that we're sort of slowly finding ourselves in a situation where we can imagine life post-COVID, we want to do something perhaps even bigger in terms of fundraising or being able to give back to the community. And while we haven't fully developed the idea what exactly we want to be, so I won't put anything hard out there yet, what we've talked about is how can we use the sort of positive energy and momentum around Arbitration Idol to perhaps provide opportunities for folks to be able to sort of mitigate things that Mandy and I have been talking about today, in terms of the cost of an unpaid internship or the cost of a conference, because those are still very real issues, and those issues will be lasting without there being some solution there too. So those are some of the ideas that Arbitration Idol might tackle in the future. But for sure, there was a lot of when folks finally understood that it wasn't actually a singing competition, because I don't think nobody really wants to hear me sing. They were really positive, and there was a lot of great support. So we look forward to doing another session sometime in 2021. And I'll let Mandy fill in the gaps that I may have left and carry from there.
I really want to hear you sing, Chris. I've got to say that.
Well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We need to do this.
Yes. All right. I tried to put a link in the chat to Svenja's digital coffee break in arbitration.
Thank you very much, Chris, for this. And I really love this idea of the link between arbitration and social issues, because sometimes we forget what really matters in life, and we think that international arbitration is all about a group of people who have very prestigious jobs and clients, and they don't care about what is going on around them. So thank you very much for bringing this link up to the surface. Could you also please tell us a bit more about Tales of the Tribunal and this exciting project of yours?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and I'll even put my Tales of the Tribunal voice on. So Tales of the Tribunal is my podcast that I do. It's been going on now for 2 years. We're heading into season 3, and quite literally, it is conversations with people from all over the world that are involved in international dispute resolution. Now, the interesting take, or our sort of unique sort of secret sauce, so to speak, is that oftentimes you listen to a legal podcast or show, or especially pre-COVID times, when you would tune in, they would say, all right, well, Article 3 of the CISG says, and it would just read, very mundane sort of points of law. And so I wanted to do away with that. I wanted to say, okay, that's cool. People could probably Google a lot of that. What's really interesting is getting to know the people behind sort of their public personas. How did they get to be where they are? And that goes back to one of the things that I mentioned in sort of my opening statements, of showing people that it's not some sort of magic or mystical sort of pill or formula that has to be done. It really is sort of very human and real experiences. And I think from the folks like, we had Sarah Grimmer was on the show as well, Dana McGrath, the president of Arbitral Women, Catherine Rogers, a bunch of folks we have had on the show, and you get to just see a very plain look at them. Meg Kinnear did an episode this year as well. And so that has been a really great opportunity to have some very casual conversations and to start to build a community around that sort of initiative. We kind of split off into Disputes Digest at the end of season 2, which is sort of a weekly summary of what's going on of the news in international arbitration, dispute resolution, as well as opportunities and events as well, calls for papers and the like, or webinars, because there are so many that I kind of try and sort of boil them down into a few minutes of conversation. So we are continuing to expand and grow, and we have all sorts of new exciting things that might drop before the end of the year. So you stay tuned.
We are looking forward to. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Mandy, please accept my apologies. I think I interrupted you before. There was a problem with the internet connection. I didn't realize you were speaking, so I'm terribly sorry for that. please, you have the floor. I want to hear your views about careers in arbitration and the arbitration idols. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artemis. I think it's always good to cut me off when I'm making bad jokes. So whatever the excuse, it was definitely a good moment to cut me off, and I may have started singing as well. You never know. I think Chris has given us a fantastic summary of Arbitration Idol. It was a pleasure to be part of the initiative. I'm really looking forward to what's going to come next. I'm very excited to keep working with Chris and Svenja, and stay tuned. As we've said, like James Bond, Arbitration Idol will return. As for careers in arbitration, I spend a lot of time mentoring young practitioners and aspiring practitioners, and I found that a number of the same questions are coming up again and again. Where do I find an internship? How do I write a really good writing sample? What do I put in my resume? How come person X seems to know about internships and I don't know anything about them? What is the secret source of information that person X has? Why am I being left out in the cold? And so I founded Careers in Arbitration to try and help those wishing to enter the field, wherever they're based in the world, to access opportunities. And opportunities are not just limited to internships, of course. They are jobs, internships, committee roles, publishing opportunities, events, speaking opportunities, training courses, anything and everything that relates to the practice of arbitration. And it's an all-inclusive website, an all-inclusive platform. It's not just about the high-profile firms. It's about people who want to work in compliance with an arbitration edge. It's about people who want to do expert work that has an arbitration edge. There's lots of ways to work in arbitration other than being counsel, and we've talked about some of them today, and Careers in Arbitration tries to capture them. Now, my platform is primarily available via LinkedIn. There will be a website in due course. At the moment, it is restricted to some rather nice waves that you can watch on the screen. If you go to careersinarbitration.com, it's very relaxing. We're doing our bit to make people relax during this stressful time. The LinkedIn platform now has 26,500 followers. And during the pandemic, I've been using it to basically offer what I've called an arbitration fix to anyone looking for inspiration and for learning opportunities. So we publicized under the hashtag arbitration fix. If you're feeling bored, there's a whole load of keynotes from very distinguished people in the field. So just put that hashtag into LinkedIn. You can check all of those out. As a community platform, we have followers from across the world who reach out to me to share their content and to share jobs. I hope it's useful for everybody who's seeking to develop a career in the field. Tell me how I can improve it, and I'll be really interested to hear from you. But please do take advantage of it. And in the future, we've got great things to come. I've got a number of new projects in the pipeline. I'm not going to announce them today because whenever I announce a project, I then fail to deliver it for another 9 months. So I'm not going to announce anything today, but there's going to be some exciting opportunities coming up in due course. So thank you for the question, Artemis.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your jokes. It's a pity that I didn't have the chance to listen to it, but if it is something in relation to singing and dancing, it's a pity that we cannot meet all in person, and then, I mean, the session would be fantastic. I could learn so many more from you, but we need to wait until the pandemic is over and we don't have these dark clouds above us. For that. So thank you very much. I also benefited a lot from Careers in Arbitration, and this is the first link that we sent to the students of the minor when we started the minor. So it's a one-stop shop for everything related to arbitration. And the second one, Tales of the Tribunal. So thank you very much both for that. Amanda, could you please share your views from your experience about mentoring in the context of a law firm? How easy it is? Is it possible? Because, sometimes we have this idea that the structure is very hierarchical and there is no really mentorship when people are so stressed in the context of a big law firm dealing with international disputes.
Sure, Artemis. I definitely can. It's something that was such a huge part of my practice. I think it all started with my first law firm that was so invested in mentorship. When I arrived, from the very first day I arrived as a student, as an intern student, I had a junior mentor and a senior mentor. So a junior mentor was someone who was only a couple years senior to me, who I could ask all my stupid questions that I didn't feel comfortable asking a senior person. And then I also had a senior mentor. It was so popular that there was also a Mentorship of the Year award every year, and the lawyers were quite competitive in terms of, because it was always a really great prize. And so I was raised up that way, I guess I would say, in terms of providing, getting the support, and then providing the support. I became a junior mentor very early on, and then I became a senior mentor, and it's something that's carried over with me. And I've worked at 3 law firms, 3 very large law firms, and 2 in Canada and 1 in the Netherlands. And it's such a necessary part of the practice, I think, in terms of providing a helping hand for associates as they go through the ranks. And I mean, not everyone is perfect at it in terms of mentorship, but it's something that, because I had such fabulous mentors when I started out, that I really wanted to invest the time and energy into it. And I hope that my mentees still think of me fondly. I know some of them still reach out to get advice and for reference letters and things for applying for PhDs and that sort of thing, which is always fantastic to keep in touch with them that way. But yeah, the majority of firms, at least the large firms that I know, do have some sort of a mentorship program. I would say to students, when you get into a law firm, if they don't have it, ask for one. Be proactive and say, I really would like to have a mentor. What happened to me when I arrived in the Netherlands is I asked for one and was given one, and it wasn't a good click. So if you don't have a click with your mentor, don't be shy to say, I'd actually like someone else. And that's a very difficult conversation to have, but it's such a valuable resource. You want to be connected with someone who you can have those difficult conversations with and seek advice and be comfortable. So that would be my little tip. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And the majority of lawyers that I know are happy to assist. So.
Thank you very much for sharing your views, and for the last tip. It is very important. We need to be fearless in this field. Thank you. Now, Barbara, you have the floor. I am sorry for abusing your kindness and the kindness of the panelists, and I'm cautious of time, so the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now absolutely wouldn't like to take the floor. I will give it to Hanna and Marilka, because now we really would like to hear from students. So both of you feel free to take over this discussion, and if there are questions, our speakers, I'm sure, will be very happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. So if anyone who's watching has any questions, please go ahead, and you can text them, or you can unmute yourself. And firstly, we have 2 questions that are pretty similar from YouTube stream. What is your advice for students wishing to pursue a career in the field of ADR, but not in the commercial field? And the second is what additional qualifications are required to have the international arbitration career, and if there should be any law practitioner of specific country to start such a career. Maybe Amanda Lee, as you have an international career, would you answer?
I guess my perception of what additional qualifications might be required is possibly slightly different to that of others. I don't have an LLM. It's not unusual in the UK not to have an LLM and to be a lawyer. A lot of people who practice in this field internationally do have LLMs. And so I always encourage students to think carefully about not just whether you need one, but what subject to pursue an LLM in. Make sure that you're picking something that's going to be valuable in the future. Remember, after all, that arbitration is a mechanism for resolving disputes, and although it has its own rules, you still need to understand the underlying law. And so pursuing an LLM in, for example, corporate law can also be very useful. It's all about trying to distinguish yourself and bring something of value to the field. When it comes to practicing internationally, you will find a lot of arbitration practitioners are dual qualified. They will have lived in multiple jurisdictions. In some cases, they will speak an incredibly large number of intimidating languages. Unlike me, I speak English, sometimes badly. I mean, I understand other languages, but I am incredibly, incredibly impressed by those who can speak fluently in other languages. So one of the things I would always recommend to students wishing to practice in this field is to think about your language skills. Think about the gaps in the market. If you look at the adverts for jobs in this field, in the US in particular, everybody wants fluent Spanish. Fluent Spanish is incredibly valuable. There's always an interest in people being able to speak French and German. There's an interest in people being able to speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, Ukrainian. Basically, if you can speak another language fluently and you can write fluently in that language as well, there is always going to be a law firm that's going to find those skills to be of particular value. So when it comes to an international career, it's obviously very, very different to practicing domestically, because when the world is not as it is now, you will find you spend a lot of your time in airport lounges. So you need to be flexible, you need to be open to those opportunities, and you need to develop a degree of cultural sensitivity as well. Every culture has its own business practices, and so cultural awareness is something that's very, very, very important when it comes to cross-border practice. So I definitely recommend focusing on developing your language skills, developing your knowledge of arbitration as a discipline, but not necessarily excluding the development of other aspects of legal practice as well. Don't micro-focus on arbitration too early in your career. I suspect that I haven't covered all three of the questions, Hannah, but perhaps somebody else might be able to pick up where I've left off, as it were.
Thank you very much.
I would like to add something to Susanna. Since you're doing an LLM right now at Stockholm specifically, what made you choose Stockholm, and did you look at any other universities, and what kind of masters were you looking into before you actually took this one?
So I actually was only considering the ICAL program. I applied only through Stockholm University. I was doing my research, of course, in the opportunities in international commercial arbitration in terms of master degrees, and this program seemed to be the most appealing to me, especially that this is a leading program in international commercial arbitration. So I definitely was very sure that I want to pursue my masters over there in Stockholm.
Thank you. I don't know if Hannah has any other question. Oh wait, there's a question in the chat.
Yes, there was also a question about ADR and peace building, how you can get in this field and how to develop it further.
Which one was that?
Sorry, there was about ADR and peace building. I don't know who would like to answer this one.
Is that the one from Alexander Wiest?
I don't take this with a grain of salt. I don't have any specific knowledge as to that, but I'm happy to give some conjecture. So first, something that a few of the speakers today have mentioned is the vis moot. While the visa moot in itself tends to be commercial arbitration, one of the really great aspects of doing the moot is the membership in the Moot Alumni Association. Because the MAA and some other organizations have this ability too, so keep your eye out for this, have what's called observer status at the United Nations. And they get invited to observe on certain topics across the range of international arbitration. So that's a good opportunity to see how that process sort of works and start making sort of some of those relationships. But building on some of the things that Mandy just said a moment ago, in terms of looking for gaps in the market. If you're interested in peace building, there are certainly people that are writing about that or active in those fields, and whatever nation you're from probably has some sort of delegation or commission on that. Saying, hey, do you can I provide? Can I do some research for you? Just reaching out to them, cold sometimes works, or providing some writings, even if very short, into the space. The international law journals, the Journal of Transnational Dispute Management, all those types of places are good ways to sort of start building a little bit of rapport around your name, and you can use it to that effect. But since I haven't done that in particular, I'm not exactly sure. But those are just some sort of general comments.
I can weigh in on the original question in terms of what you need to do to start in the practice, at least from a large law firm perspective, because I've done recruitment in law firms for 16 years, so I know I've interviewed a heck of a lot of students and hired a lot of students to become lawyers, and I can tell you from a perspective of a junior coming in that there isn't anything specific except for the fact that you have to have, at least in the large law firms, the starting point is very good marks. So transcripts are the starting point. So you get, say we get 150 applications. The first thing we do before actually looking at any of the CVs is we look at the transcripts. There's a level that you need to reach. Anyone that doesn't reach that level, those resumes are put aside, and then we have our starting point. Then we start looking at your background and what you've done, and your cover letters, what you have to say about why you're interested. But I mean, in terms of students coming in to become junior associates, we like, at least from a law firm perspective, a wide range of interests. So it's not necessarily, when I'm interviewing, I'm not necessarily hiring only for the international arbitration practice. I'm hiring for the firm as a whole, because what's going to happen when you come in is you're going to have to do rotations, at least from a large law firm standpoint. So you're not going to get to stay in arbitration the whole time. It may be your first choice, and you'll get to do a rotation in arbitration, but you're also going to have to do a rotation in another area of the law firm. Yeah, at De Brouw, you have a 3-year program as a junior lawyer. You spend 1.5 years in one department and 1.5 years in another department, and then at the end of those 3 years, there's a discussion about where you'll sit in terms of where you'll be placed for a permanent contract. So, I mean, having that background certainly helps in terms of your interest in international arbitration, but it isn't a barrier. I'd say focus on getting great marks, and start getting to know people. If you're interested in a particular place, cold calling, as Chris said, call people, ask them to go for a coffee or have a chat, get to know them a little bit so they know you. So there's a face to the name on the resumes. And also something that you can add in your cover letter, that I had a conversation with Amanda Kemshaw. If you made the firm sound so wonderful, I can't think of wanting to work anywhere but there. A little flattery always helps. But it is in terms of a starting point. There isn't any particular area of study that is a stronger, and it makes a stronger candidate or not, at least from the standpoint of all of the years of recruiting that I've done for 3 different law firms.
Thank you. And I also have a follow-up question to that, whether being a barrister is necessary for the career in ADR, which some of the international law students may be interested in, especially.
I mean, I'm a barrister and a solicitor, but that's when you get your degree in Canada, you're both. So it's a little bit different. Perhaps Amanda, from the UK perspective, can talk about that, but I think it would depend on the jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Hannah, if I may just follow up on this question, because I know that from the perspective of our students who take the minor, they already come to a different jurisdiction because we have many foreign students, and they sometimes get quite disappointed that they cannot go directly into the arbitration practice because they still have to go back to their home countries or go somewhere else to qualify. So I think the question is more broad. It's about the law degree and the legal qualification. And of course, in some countries, it takes quite a few years to become a lawyer. In some, it may take less than that. But I think that I would like our students to be aware of the fact that these two things, law degree and the law qualification, is quite important in international arbitration too. Because as Amanda Lee mentioned, you really have to know the underlying law. And if you are the best in the procedure, it may not be enough. So also to avoid disappointments, I think that our students who are interested in international arbitration should think of that, and they really need to become present in some arbitration market. It can be in the Netherlands, but I think they have to be aware of that. Sorry, just 2 cents.
Thank you very much for the clarification. We have also Anna Vikovic who wanted to ask the question, so please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anna Ivkovic. I first just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today. I've learned a lot already from all that you guys have said. And so my question might be a little bit more specific, but it's about like, working in the field of ADR. I am an Indonesian Serbian student here. I'm not an EU national, but I want to try to work here in Europe, not in my hometown. So I wanted to ask, maybe from your experiences, how do law firms usually react when they are, when people are applying and they are not a national? Would you say that they prefer nationals over international people? Do they prefer like people who can speak the language? Would you say that this is something that is very important besides all the legal qualifications that you need for applying? Yeah.
Well, I'll just make one quick comment, and I'll probably hand it off to Amanda Kimshaw because she's had more experience in doing recruiting. I would say take a step back, right? And this is sort of the sort of business thought process to the world of law. In a very tangible way, law firms at the end of the day are business. They're selling legal advice, and the lawyers are the ones that make that product. So in a very tangible sense, if you're applying to a law firm, and that law firm only works, I'm just going to pick a country, only with German clients, and they only work on German matters, and they mostly work in German law, then it's going to be difficult to come in there if you only speak English or you don't speak German at all. So when you approach any law firm or any organization, whether they be multinational or not, what you've got to understand first is, what do they do? What do they do day to day? And do you have a skill set that aligns with that? Do you have something of value that you can offer them? Because, okay, let's say the same German law firm, but let's say they do have a few clients or a few things that they might do in Serbia, or maybe they've got some tie to some other thing that you do, or maybe they really have a very specific, telecom or, commercial arbitration sort of background. Well, you can go to them and say, hey, I know I don't have your typical profile, but I know that you are active here and you do a lot of this kind of stuff. Well, I actually just happen to have done my thesis on these types of things, or I wrote a paper on these types of things. And what that shows is, one, you took the time to get to know the firm and know something about them before you knocked on their door. But two, that you're coming and having thought about how you can bring value to them. Because, of course, you want something from them. But more importantly, if you're putting their thoughts first and saying, hey, this is some way that I can add value to you, that's a way that you can have a productive conversation from the outset.
That I absolutely agree with Chris on that. That is absolutely true. From a international standpoint, working at a almost pure Dutch law firm for quite a number of years, and one of the only internationals at the start of the practice, and not speaking any Dutch, and not being a Dutch lawyer, it was an uphill battle. I think for me coming in, I had already been practicing for quite a number of years, so my seniority helped to break down the barriers in terms of my Canadian law degree and my non-Dutch speaking abilities. However, I can tell you from a recruiting standpoint and from where De Brouw in any event is in terms of hiring internationals, it's a law firm that is internationalizing is part of their program, what they want to do. They hire international lawyers every year, junior lawyers right out of university, mainly from the master's programs, but not exclusively. And I've hired over the years, or helped in the hiring over the years of students from all over the world, from various different backgrounds, different law degrees. One thing that they had in common, the majority of them, is that they had done a master's in the Netherlands, and then wanted to stay. So that was the common link, but that also wasn't necessarily the case for every hire. So at least in terms of where I worked and where I was recruiting, there was no barrier for internationals coming in that were non-Dutch qualified. But I think that's also a unique, there's not going to be a lot of firms like that. I don't think there is any other firm in the Netherlands that's quite like that. So I agree with Chris in terms of really taking a look at the different places that you would be interested in and finding out what they do, doing your research and looking at whether or not you can add value and whether or not you really want to work there. So part of the process is also for you to figure out, where do I want to devote my time and where am I going to learn from? And so that's part of the process as well for you. But, it is doable. You can do it. And I look, and I can, talk to you in class about it further if you like.
Thank you so much, Ms. Amanda and Mr. Chris. That really, really helps, even though it might have been kind of a stupid question, but it really helps me with thinking about it. So thank you.
Not a stupid question at all.
We have some questions in the chat, and I would like to invite the people who asked them to unmute their mic and ask them in person. If that's possible, that'd be fun. So we have a question from Nadim and Alexander. So if either one of you wants to speak up, you can take the floor.
Yes, hi, I'm Alex, and now we have heard a lot about the like some rather specific topics like challenges in the field of international arbitration. But could one of the speakers maybe explain to me how, for example, the preparation or the course of an arbitration case is different from that of an court case? Because of course in university we usually talk about court cases, but how to prepare and how to conduct arbitration, that is not that much talked about. So some insight would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I can take that one at the outset. So the way that we do it in our company is that typically we almost always have a mediation, sort of proceeding and hearing before we go to a full-fledged arbitration. That's part of most of the agreements that we do. Typically, we do a pretty extensive fact-finding sort of exercise. They can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months before we actually decide or make the decision to go into an arbitration. Oftentimes in parallel to that, you will see a bunch of negotiations going back and forth between the parties. And eventually they're becoming sort of a point where we decide either we want to pursue someone into arbitration, or we will say that we're not going to make an offer of settlement that will be sufficient to resolve the matter. So we accept that the other side will bring an arbitration proceeding against us. From my experience in litigation, typically, and this is more in private practice, a client would show up, say, hey, here's the case that we think we have. It would be a lot more to the point, over the course of a month or two, we would do the fact finding with their assistants and reach out to them, file the case, and things are a little bit more streamlined, not necessarily faster, but, streamlined, efficient in some ways. But it really does kind of depend on the industry that you're in and the specific role. But there are elements that are the same in both. You've got to do your fact finding, you've got to understand the law, and you've got to do a sort of risk assessment before you decide to sign up for a multi-year, potentially millions of dollars size case.
Thank you so much.
I think I can add a couple things from what Chris said for Alex in terms of differences, and two big ones is that the parties have a lot more control over the timing of the process than you do in a court case. So there, in a court case, there are the court runs the process, and in arbitration, it's the parties that can decide. They're the ones that choose the arbitrators in most instances, or there can be a choice. Each party gets to choose one arbitrator, and then there's a third one that is appointed, at least in the arbitrations that I've done. And also the parties can control the timeline. So you have to come together and try to come up with an agreement in terms of when the stages of the arbitration will take place. So that's something that doesn't happen necessarily in the court process.
Thank you for the answer.
We still have Nadim, if he wants to take the floor and then ask the question. Or otherwise, I'll move on to the questions that are posed on the YouTube Live. And they're both for Ms. Kemshaw. So the first one is, was there a big difference between the ADR in Canada and the Netherlands? And the second one is, were you required to follow a course before entering into the teaching field?
I'm questioning my teaching abilities. It's got to be my family law students. Okay. First, there was a difference between Canada and Europe for sure in terms of ADR. And the main one is that mediation was much more established in terms of an alternative dispute resolution mechanism than arbitration was, at least. I'm going back 20 years now, though. So this was when I was practicing, and the last time in Canada was, I think, 10 years ago. Mediations were very popular and something that was used not only in employment matters and family law matters, but also in commercial cases. That's less so in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, you don't really see a lot of mediations used in the commercial context. I'm in the process of becoming a certified mediator in the Netherlands with a hope of changing that in terms of commercial cases. But that is the difference. Arbitration was much more popular in terms of a dispute resolution within Europe than in Canada. That's changed now. Canada's sort of jumped on the bandwagon, and there's a lot more established practitioners in the arbitration field. In terms of my teaching, having a course in order to teach, I'm required to do a teaching certification to work at the university. So, but that goes on while I'm actually teaching. So I don't have my certification at the moment. Yeah.
So Nadim couldn't make his mic work, so I'll just ask on behalf of him. So what are you most proud of in terms of your legal career? And if I may ask that to Susanna, maybe, because she's still a baby in the field, but she still has a bit of a career. And yeah, go ahead.
Of course, I think that one of my biggest achievements would be my intern work at Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration. I was actually also in charge of designing the mediation training course for the Legal Services Commission for the ADC, Australian Dispute Centre. I authored 2 articles on the importance of Deepwater Horizon case for the integrity of arbitral process, and also an article on resolving Belt and Road disputes through alternative dispute resolution. And these articles were featured on the ADC website and also as part of the bulletin series of the ADC. And of course, I also think that my that getting into the masters and successfully finishing its first parts of the program would also count as an achievement towards my developing my skills in arbitration. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any questions, you can unmute yourself and you can ask the floor.
Hi, I have a question I'd like to ask. I don't know if this might be considered rude, but I'd like to ask all of you in the panel. But yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all of your insights. But yeah, my question is, what was the most memorable hardest part of your career or your job, if that's not too forward to ask?
Maybe Amanda Lee can start with us?
Sure. The hardest part of my practice is the fact that in order to do the things that I've agreed to do, I think I've basically had to give up sleeping. International arbitration as a profession can be all-consuming, and one of the things that we found in particular during the pandemic is that people's expectations have shifted. There's no longer this clear distinction between your private life and your work life. So as a result, we find, I basically say nowadays I work on US time, effectively. So I'm kind of asleep first thing in the morning when my students are writing to me with queries, so that I can be working at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning dealing with queries from people in the US or Latin America or the Caribbean. So enduring that sort of lifestyle for a prolonged period without allowing it to completely jeopardize your personal health, your personal relationships, your mental health is quite a challenge. And so, although it's a very sort of practical point, it's something you really do need to bear in mind if you want to be successful in the field. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot out of you personally. So I strongly recommend mastering the art of sleeping on planes. It's not an art I personally have mastered, but hey, if anyone has any really good tips about how to sleep on planes, I'm very happy to hear them. So it's quite simply the fact that we are now expected to basically be available 24/7, and that can take a lot out of you. So, enter the field at your peril. It's going to have an impact on your sleep patterns. So, but not to try and discourage anyone, of course.
If anyone would like to add on to that?
Chris, do you want to go, or do you want you go ahead? I'll go at the end.
I was trying to motion, but I wasn't sure how I was going to cross. Well, what I will say is that, Mandy, I can assure you as a client, we are not these types of 24/7 folks. So, in spirit, we can say, we don't demand our attorneys be available 24/7. But yeah, I think that's an interesting question. The most difficult sort of thing that you've had to deal with. What I'll say, Celine, and I can, be a little bit forthcoming. It's a forthcoming question, so I'll be pretty transparent about it. I think you have to some extent, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And as much as that sounds like a platitude, when you're graduating law school and you're talking about the kind of things that you want to do, you want to work in a field that's already pretty niche. The plain fact is that until recently, I literally could count on one hand how many Black men that I knew that worked in international arbitration. So not having a clear path or knowing exactly sort of what success looked like in that regard is something that's just difficult. And so you have to be willing to say, okay, well, you don't know someone that looks exactly like you, that has done exactly what you've done, but there's some other ways in which you can connect. You know, maybe they, you know, were an outsider to law as well, or a first generation law student, or they have a more business mindset, or the types of things that they're interested in, you know, sort of in the periphery of law. Those are the types of things that they help you build those sort of relationships. But yeah, I mean, I think that goes to the point of building and developing your professional identity, whatever you want that to be and however you manage or imagine seeing yourself as a professional. I think those are difficult and challenging things. And when you don't have a clear idea of what that looks like from someone that's gone ahead of you, I think that was really difficult when I was first starting my career. But you start to figure that out, and then, yeah, I mean, you find other sources of you know, inputs in that regard, and those become sort of the folks that or the models that you might follow.
Thank you.
For me, I'm going to give you a personal story in terms of, I think, what was one of the hardest things in my practice, a moment in time that I still think back on and think, my goodness. And it was, I did a very large arbitration while I was very, very pregnant. And thought that I had finished the arbitration, went off and had my baby. And during my maternity leave, the arbitrators came back and said, we've decided that this particular topic is actually the center point of this case, and we want you to come back and argue. And the point was, it was a contract dispute originally, and it turned into a Romanian inheritance law topic, not my area of specialty. And so I came back from maternity leave and got on a plane. Speaking of Amanda's plane stories, I got on a plane to Bucharest and left my little baby at home and met with several experts in Romanian inheritance law to basically immerse myself in that, so I knew what I was talking about, and then I used them as experts in the arbitration. Came back to the Netherlands and argued a 2-day arbitration case on Romanian inheritance law, and it was a marathon, a whirlwind extravaganza, but I'm proud to say we won the arbitration. I was very, very pleased with myself. So despite the fact that it was, and my team, despite the fact that it was a very difficult process, it was also really rewarding. And that's one of the things in arbitration, I think, is that, at least from my experience, is that I have learned so much in my practice. You know, it's a lifelong learning process. I've done arbitration cases involving Romanian law, Swiss law. I did a Thai arbitration. You know, you're constantly learning new things, new laws, new jurisdictions. It's fantastic. And I would highly recommend it for anyone that is interested in a career of lifelong learning.
Thank you very much for these answers. I don't know if Susanna wants to add something on that already, or you didn't experience that challenges yet.
Well, I can recall a couple of times when I had to pick up the phone at the Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration, and we be very careful on what am I saying. I had to follow, of course, the procedures. I had to get familiar with Hague arbitration rules. So I always needed to be very aware of what am I saying in that particular phone call with someone who is interested to submit a request for arbitration to the institution. So that may be sometimes stressful and challenging. So definitely I could give this as my experience.
Thank you so much for all your responses. It was very inspiring.
Yes, and thank you, Celine, for the question. And we have also a few questions already on YouTube. One is from Todoris, who asked whether an individual can argue that ADR undermines the purpose of the law in some instances. What is your view on that? I don't know who would like to answer the question.
Sorry, could you say one more time? The audio went out, at least for me, for a couple of seconds. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, maybe my internet connection is a bit cracking. The question was whether you can argue that ADR undermines the purpose of law in some instances.
In my view, no. I think they run parallel to each other. I think it depends on what the specific needs are. I wouldn't see them as competing forces as much as sometimes you need an ADR in negotiation or some sort of thing to guide you in the direction of resolving it outside of the formality of going to court. And sometimes you need the sort of strict procedure and force of a national court to sort of get what you need. But yeah, I don't think they undermine one or the other. I think that they run parallel and are specific to the situation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And there's also a question from Dennis to Ms. Kemisho. Is there an option to follow your preferred criminal law career while incorporating ADR? So whether you ever thought it's possible to mix this two?
I sort of left criminal law behind quite a long time ago. I mean, I think in terms of restorative justice in Canada, that's something in terms of mediation, circle sentencing, that type of a thing, you would be able to incorporate it for sure in the criminal context. It's difficult when you have victims, obviously, and perpetrators, but it is something that's coming. And also in the Netherlands in terms of mediations for minor offenses in the criminal context. So I think it is. I think you can combine it. It's a burgeoning field for sure.
Thank you very much. And there's one more question from Noelia. Maybe from Ms. Amanda Lee, it would be the best. What companies would you suggest for a year 2 student to already start internship in the field of ADR?
I'm not sure if Amanda Lee's connection is still stable.
I see there can be some problem. So maybe someone else would like to answer what where we can turn as year 2 student to start internship in ADR.
Maybe Miss Kemshaw, because she has the most experience in recruitment, actually.
I can't. I think definitely Mandy would be better placed to answer. I can't really give a list of companies off the top of my head. So hopefully Mandy will have her mic fixed. Oh, there she is.
Perfect. So I don't know if you had a chance to hear the question, Ms. Lee, but it was whether you have any companies that you could advise year 2 law student to apply to in the ADR field.
I'm having some connection problems, so I think I'm hearing half of the question and then half of the question again. Do I have any companies? And then I heard something about second-year law students. So I'm not 100% sure how the two parts go together, or if I've just managed to go the whole thing. I must confess. My apologies. I seem to be having a connection issue.
No problem. We all experience it at some point. The question was whether you have any companies you could advise law students to apply to in the ADR field. But I think we still have the connection problem, so maybe for now we're gonna.
I'll jump in. What I would tell you is that if you're looking specifically in the ADR field, most multinational companies have something like that. If you get to know or reach out to if you reach out to the HR department generally, but also if you start to just look specifically for litigation type of folks or ADR folks at those companies, you'll probably find someone. People sometimes reach out to our company, and of course we do those types of things. So maybe first start with finding the companies you're interested in, reach out to them. Also, whatever your local chamber of commerce is might as well. They probably have some contacts or know some people that you might want to reach out to that might be able to give you a point in the right direction.
Thank you for this answer. And there's also a question which maybe is the best for Susanna Cieplińska. What were the biggest barriers when you were studying in China? Did you experience anything like that?
Well, definitely the language was quite a big one. I undertook some intense courses on Chinese language, so I had 8 hours of intense Chinese in the first semester, which helped me a lot. I think after a few months, I was already able to communicate to some basic extent. And then I actually got to live with a Chinese family, which was definitely helpful in overcoming this language barrier. And then I think also what was very different from what I know, it was the judicial system in China, and also the lack of three division of powers as we know it. This is a little bit a different situation over there in China. So at first I had to understand how these things work there, and of course they work very, very differently over there. So I would say these two challenges would be the most relevant ones that I could mention.
And I would throw in on there probably cultural differences too. There's just a very particular way of doing business in China, or just interacting with your colleagues, or what yes means, but yes in a certain situation may not mean yes. When it's okay to sort of to approach people about certain things, or you have to go to first, relationships. It's a whole thing. There are books on it. There are books, movies, lessons, classes about working in China, but it's great. There's a lot of opportunity.
I definitely agree with Chris on that.
Yeah, that has to be a very different experience than what we know from Europe. The academic question by Martin, maybe all of you could answer it, is whether if all of you could go back in time to your student times, what advice will you give to yourself for the future career? Maybe Ms. Campbell would like to first start.
Sure. I think I would let my past self do exactly the same thing. I'm really happy with how my career has developed and what I've done. I think my advice, something that is sort of a mantra for myself, is, no regrets. If I'm interested in something, then I go for it. Take risks. If it's never been done before, well, then maybe you're the person to go ahead and do it. So, but that's sort of been my personality all the way through. So I don't need to tell my young self that. So yeah, no, I really don't have any advice other than keep doing what you're doing.
Great. Maybe now Ms. Lee could answer if the connection is back.
Hopefully the connection will hold up for us. I would tell my young self so many things. Like when I was young, I was terrified of absolutely everything. I was terrified of public speaking. I was terrified of networking. I was terrified of missing out on time to devote to academic pursuits. So as a result, I didn't take up lots of opportunities that would have been available to me. So if I could go back and do it all again, I would just say to myself, be brave and say yes. And that's what I say to students now. Don't ignore opportunities just because they're not academic opportunities. Make sure that you get involved with those committees, those societies, those organizations. Do things like volunteer for mooting. Make sure that you get involved in student journals and clubs and organizations. If you want to start developing your public speaking skills, plans. 5 or so years into your career, which I've been putting off for. So there are lots of opportunities to completely use the first time. And nowadays, if I want to do something, that's my approach. I just go off and do it. But when I was younger, I was a lot more terrified of opportunities. So people change. I know that we say they don't, but as we get older, people change. And the last thing I will say is learn how to use social media. It's enormously important in this exciting virtual world. It was enormously important in an international field before. It's not something I would have said to myself in the past because I'm old and we didn't really have social media then. But nowadays, everybody how to use media fully in response. The sky's your limit. I wish you all every success.
Thank you very much. Maybe now, Mr. Campbell, would you answer the same question? Do you have anything to add?
Sure, I'll start with a short story. So one last time traveling bout here. This is my first year of my first year in China. I just started studying about international arbitration. I've taken my course in London, as I've told you, the very basics of international dispute resolution. So I feel like I know a little something. I have been asked by my Chinese classmates at Tsinghua to introduce this professor that they're going to be giving an award to, and the professor says, I'm going to be giving an award. So I'm sitting next to him at dinner, and we're talking, and he's there to teach, a 1 month or 6 weeks sort of intensive course in international arbitration. And he says to me, he looks at me, and he's like, "Well, so I guess I'll be seeing you in class, huh? You're going to take my course." And well, I've already taken international arbitration, and so I say, "Well, no, probably not. I've got some other stuff to do, and I'm going to be busy." And of course, this professor, come to find out, unbeknownst to a young Chris Campbell, was none other than one Gary Bourne. And so I've just said to Gary Bourne, "Yeah, I'm not going to take your class. I got other stuff to do." So maybe I might have done that one a little differently. But in a more serious and practical tips sort of way, I think Mandy's tips are great. I think the most important thing that you can realize, in balancing what Mandy's just said, which is to say yes to a lot of things, is to remember that you have time. And I don't say that to tell you to, don't be ambitious and to go after things, but to realize that, that your development into whatever career it is that you imagine, it doesn't come overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow or next week and, people will be calling you to appoint you as arbitrator or, publishing your things immediately. And that's okay. You got to invest time in the process, really understanding the law, of understanding the business, understanding the fields that you want to go into, because by comparison, there are a ton of people that are doing that exact same thing. They've been doing it for decades, that understand a lot of these things, and you'll be there too. You will. But it takes time to get there. And so just understand that you're going to put a plan into place. You're going to think about how you're going to do these things strategically, and you will get there, but just be patient and understand that it does take time for that to develop. And as long as you manage your health and your expectations, you will absolutely get there. So I'm excited to see what all of you do.
Perfect. I think it's very useful tips for our students who may be gonna consider the career in ADR. So thank you for that. And I think it's all of the questions we received. So maybe someone still wants to come here and ask the question live.
I'm looking also at the clock. And we just talked about the challenges of work-life balance, and we're keeping Chris away from his Thanksgiving dinner. I feel very bad about it. So I think we can wrap up if there are no further questions. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank our speakers for their participation and their great tips for students. It's really fantastic for our students to learn from you and hear your experiences, and it's also fantastic what you're doing. I really would like to compliment you all for working towards more diversity of the arbitration field. I think it's a long, long way before us, but all your initiatives are very important, and I hope that one day our students will be able to benefit from it all, and that we will have arbitration field more diverse and with more opportunities for people from different geographical locations too. So thank you all again. And thank you very much, Artemis, Marilka, and Hannah for moderating this discussion. Just one thing for students, following the advice from our speakers, don't be afraid to volunteer and do things that may be of interest to you too. Try to build up your CV, and we have a lot of projects for you. So if you would like to join us, and students are developing their projects on multi-level regulation and ADR as we speak, there is a website that you can follow that I included in the chat. So feel free to reach out. And we will try to help you make this first step, because I think it's also about making the first step and making yourself more visible, writing a short blog post, participating in the podcast, and so on and so forth. So we really would like to hear from you. And of course, we will also be in touch with our speakers. If you have any questions, we will also reach out if we may. For now, again, many thanks, and I wish you all a great evening.
Thank you all so much. Happy Thanksgiving!
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, Chris.
Right at Turkey.
Of course. See y'all soon. Cheers.
Bye.